Are you starting?
Yeah.
Well, shit, you're supposed to say, like, go. It's okay, I can edit it out. Hey, everybody, this is Scott. He's got some information on the vaccine, and he's doing some amazing things with it. So I'm just going to let him talk about what he's learned in the last couple of months and what he's doing about it. So, go for it.
I appreciate it.
Just spit knowledge.
I'm going to try. I'm going to stumble through it because there's a lot here within the legal realm. But before I begin, there's kind of 4 things I want to go over. First off, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legal person. I'm just a concerned citizen that felt backed into a corner and is fighting his way out. And in doing so, I found a lot of really good information in my research. I'm going to provide links. I'm going to provide all the evidence I have. So when this video goes, all those links will be there. Which brings me to point number 2. All the links and everything I'm providing, please go do the research yourself, understand it, and know it. Because if we're a united front that knows, then we can actually fight. We have a standing chance. And then, point number 3, because we're fighting, it's not going to be easy. I implore you to go check out Ronald Reagan's speech. It's called "We Must Fight," because it's you're fighting against an opposing theory, like an opposing thought, something that somebody completely believes in. When we fought terrorists downrange, they believed in what they believed in what they were doing so wholeheartedly they were willing to give their life for it. And you best believe that's going to be the same fight we're going to have here. You're going to have people that are going to let their passions get the best of them, that whether they believe in the vaccine or believe in what they're doing is right and holy, or the fact that they made the choice and now they want others to buy into it. But either way, it's not going to be an easy fight. For whatever reason, it ends up being. It's just not going to be easy. And again, because I'm just a person giving my own research, please, if you have more information, I'll give you guys an email. If you have something you found, maybe it was misunderstood, misinterpreted, I'm always open to learning and always open to learning more. So I will provide an email. You guys are more than happy to email me. I'll send you all the information, all the links, all the articles, everything I've got. And it's all government sites, so it's their own words we're going to use against them. So first thing, this all started because of the military. I've got a little over 15 years in the military, and I wasn't going to leave without a fight. Whether I believe in the vaccine or not, doesn't matter. What matters is what's wrong and what's right, or what's true and what's legal. So get that out of your head. Don't let the passion cloud your judgment or produce a bias. The information I'm going to present to you is what is right, what is true, and what is law, and how that is used to our advantage. Because what they're doing is technically lawful, but it's executed unlawfully or illegally. And that's what we're going to get into. So specifically, AR, Army Regulation 40-562, specifically subchapter 7. So this is for your military folks. I'll get into the civilian here in a minute with all the executive orders and the mandates, right? And U.S. codes, USCs. So for the military, first things first, Army Regulation 40-562, subchapter 7, specifically lays out our immunization process. And I can go into any other one like AF and I forget the Marines. But it's, every one of them has a similar regulation that specifically states that when we signed the dotted line, we had to get vaccinated under the FDA guidelines and regulations. And that's what's important. And the reason for that is, like I said, it is a lawful order for us to become vaccinated. It's nothing new. We all know that. However, how they're executing it is wrong. Currently, the only FDA-approved vaccine is Pfizer Comirnaty. So I know you guys have seen, or hopefully have seen, all the confusion on the difference between BioNTech, Comirnaty. They're the same. They're generic versus name brand. It doesn't matter. Again, we take the emotion, we take the bias out of it, and what we're going to find is that when you go onto the FDA page, the FDA specifically states that Pfizer BioNTech is authorized for distribution under the EUA policy. The EUA policy holds certain legal implications versus being FDA approved. So with that being said, Pfizer BioNTech is only authorized under the EUA policy. Pfizer Comirnaty is the FDA approved vaccine. even on when you talk to medical professionals or go on the FDA page, it's going to say that they can be used interchangeably because their ingredients and their makeup, whatever, is basically the same, minus a few changes. Those few changes are what are the difference between FDA approved and not FDA approved. EUA policy labels every drug as experimental, which means it is voluntary. So whether it is the same or not, in legal writing on the FDA page, it states it as an experimental drug, which means they cannot force you to take that. And I'll get into this later under 21 USC, US code 360 Bravo Bravo Bravo, long list, I'll provide it for you guys. Essentially, they can only force you to do that under a time of chemical, biological, or radioactive issues, or warfare, which, as we know, is not currently the case. So they cannot force you to get anything that is not FDA approved and is written in the different codes. I'll put out more information on those. So you can only be forced to get Pfizer Comirnaty, not BioNTech. I've been working with National Guards in the different states on that legal reason alone. As much as anybody states that they are the same, on the FDA webpage, if you go into questions and answers, you go down 18 to the 18th question, 18th or 13th, 18th question down, it reads, is the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine interchangeable with other COVID-19 vaccines? Because you also have Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and everything else. The answer on the FDA page, the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine has the same formulation as the FDA-approved Comirnaty 19. Remember the difference, EUA versus FDA-approved. It specifically states FDA-approved Comirnaty, not Pfizer BioNTech. Right? And can be used interchangeably to provide the COVID-19 vaccination series without presenting any safety or effective concerns. Next sentence. The products are legally distinct with certain differences. Granted, it goes on to talk about how it doesn't impact safetiness or effectiveness, but it doesn't matter. They're saying, yes, it can be used interchangeably because it still is supposed to do its job, but the exact statement that they are legally distinct means that Pfizer BioNTech is not FDA approved. And until they can produce Pfizer Comirnaty, they cannot force you, whether military or civilian, to get inoculated. Hands down. And that's where we start bringing in all the legal mumbo jumbo, which I'll get into for the executive orders for everyone else.
So if it's not FDA approved, then they're not responsible for it, right? Is that what you were saying the other day?
They cannot force you to get it.
Right, but wasn't you saying something about them being FDA approved?
You're right. I'm sorry. Okay. So, and the reason for that is, as Jamie was pointing out, so when it's considered experimental under the EUA policy, the manufacturer is actually exempt from any financial or legal implications due to any adverse reactions or complications, because it's considered experimental. You're voluntarily taking that, which means that they're not responsible. Once it's FDA approved and you are forced to take it, which I know many people are asking, well, if you force me to take the vaccine, what happens if, and this is why. Because once it's FDA approved and you are forced and mandated to take it, Pfizer and whoever's forcing you to do that is now held responsible. And no matter what the company says, that is law. So that's why there is a huge legal distinction between EUA and FDA. Because now that whole parameter shifts and they have to be liable for it, which is why it goes through all the testing and everything else to ensure that it is safe and effective. The whole reason all this was set up. So again, we're going back to not emotion, not bias, we're going back to law, regulation. So that way you can, one, stay clear and focus on your mission, but two, convey this information in a manner, because as I said, it's not going to be an easy fight, so you're going to need to be able to communicate clearly and concisely that it is illegal what they're doing. Even though the law or order is lawful, it is illegal the way it's being executed. Until they can produce the FDA approved vaccine, you cannot get vaccinated, whether you're military or civilian. Plain and simple. Which I'll get into the civilian part of it and what code protects you there. The other part is there's religious exemptions and medical. There's religious, administrative, and religious exemptions. So yeah, medical, admin, religious. Each one of them hold their own exemptions or have their own laws and regulations guiding that. Some of them are a little ambiguous. Fortunately for us, Clinton actually had an attorney general provide some very clear guidelines on how the executive branch under an executive order is to carry out and handle those exemptions without breaking rules and regulations on privacy. And that's all going to be taken care of in the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993. That act, in accordance with Executive Order 13798 and Federal Regulation 21675, which were signed in back May 4, 2017, had the Attorney General give 20 basically 20 very distinct guidelines on how to execute that. So you have federal law actually protecting you if you choose to take a religious exemption. And the reason I mentioned that it's an executive order and then a federal law and the Attorney General writes on it is because remember, an executive order or an executive memorandum only outlines how the executive branch and or executive agencies, excluding the, there's one department that's actually excluded from executive orders. That's part of the executive branch. It's in my notes, but unfortunately I'm scatterbrained. Don't get blown up. That they're excluded from actually following executive orders. So an executive order is not a law. Laws are written first as a bill by the legislative or judicial branch, then presented to the House for voting, then it goes to Congress for voting, and then it goes to the president to be either written in a law or vetoed, ratified, right? So if somebody says it's an executive order, it's a law, again, they're proving that they obviously don't understand how government works, and they're also probably proving the fact that they haven't done their research and they're just reading verbatim what somebody else told them, which is why I implore you to please do your own research. So an executive order only outlines how an executive branch operates, which I'm going to get into how that federal regulation, right, which is actual law in accordance with the executive order and the Protection of Religious Liberty Act works. But to start that off, good old James Madison wrote in his Memorial and Remonstrate Against Religious Assessment, which is how this all came to be. He says, the free exercise of religion is in its nature an unalienable right. And it goes on to talk about how it's an exercise of religious observation and practice, which is important. Because when you start seeking religious exemptions, you can't just state based on the face of a religion that you are exempt from doing certain things. There are certain parts of a religion or certain things within a religion that will allow you to, or will preclude you from certain, will allow you to abstain from certain laws and regulations based on your belief. And the great part about the federal regulation that I'm going to cite in that is that it protects you from them trying to violate that. So if your company states that your supervisor or midline supervisor is the person that is authorizing or approving your religious exemption, that is wrong on so many levels, because you're protected from that because it is a personal bias. As long as you're within certain regulations or codes or guidelines from this act, then there's nothing they can do about that. So take time, please, and read the Federal Law Protection for Religious Liberty, which was written, or act, which is then written by the Attorney General guideline. So part of that is, it's high-level principles that were written by the Attorney General, so just to take a couple excerpts from that, the President has instructed me, the Attorney General, to issue guidance interpreting the religious liberty protections in federal law as appropriate in Executive Order number 13798 and 4-82 Federal Regulation 2165. I'm issuing this memorandum and appendix to guide all administrative agencies and executive departments. Again, an executive order only controls how the executive agencies and branch operate. It's not law. So there's certain things they can and cannot do. The first one specifically states that in the United States, the free exercise of religion is not merely a policy preference to be traded against other policy preferences. It is a fundamental right. You have the right to practice whatever religion you want. So if somebody were to start a religion and that religion believed that your blood had to remain pure of synthetic materials, they cannot question the authenticity of that religion, nor can they question the religious beliefs of that question. So that sets that precedence right there. So in clause number 2, the free exercise of religion included the right to act or abstain from action in accordance with one's religious beliefs. So clause number 2, one of those high principles written, says the free exercise clause protects not just the right to believe or the right to worship, it protects the right to perform or abstain from performing certain physical acts in accordance with one's belief. Federal statutes, including the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, support that protection, broadly defining the exercise of religion to encompass all aspects and observance and practice, whether or not central to or required by particular religious faith. So they can't question it. You are given that right. High principle number 4, Americans do not give up their freedom of religion by participating in the marketplace. So they can't say, well, because it's a profit or a non-profit religion, doesn't matter. Right? Government may not restrict acts or abstentions because of the beliefs they display. The Freedom Exercise Clause of the Constitution protects against government actions that target any religious conduct. So if there's any type of reprisal or retaliation because you're trying to seek a religious exemption, you're protected. High level principle, number 6, government may not target religious individuals or entities with special disabilities based on their religion. Again, you're protected. Number 10, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993 prohibits the federal government from substantially burdening any aspect of religious observances or practices unless imposition of that burden on a particular religion adherent satisfies strict scrutiny. So what that actually means. The RFA, or the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, prohibits the federal government from substantially burdening a person's exercise of religion. So forcing you to get a mandate would then make you a sinner within your religion, forcing a inherent strict scrutiny against your religion. That's what that means. So unless the federal government demonstrates that the application of such burden to the religious adherent is the least restrictive means of achieving a compelling governmental interest. So again, we refer back to 21 USC. If there was a time of chemical, biological, or radioactive warfare, and everybody needed to become inoculated because of radiation poisoning or something of that fact. So if the only way to protect you was to force inoculation, even though it was against your belief, but you weren't going to be able to survive without it, they could potentially write a waiver, which is only accepted under the 21 UFC by the president or vice president during those specific circumstances. So again, that's why that applies. Last part I'm going to read is the RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, does not permit the federal government to second guess the reasonableness of a religious belief. They cannot question what you believe. So again, if somebody creates religion, and this is what the religion states, which falls in line with why you're really seeking the religious exemption, they can't question that. So your first line supervisor cannot be the one to say, oh, well, it falls in line with the regulation or not, because he doesn't know any better. That would need to come from within the company on a higher level, or else you could potentially have some legal recourse. And a lot of these will hold legal recourses. I can get into even more, but those are the ones I specifically want to highlight on the religious exemption, because on the face value alone, that specifically gives you that freedom. The exemptions have been a thing for a very long time, especially in the military. As we know, within the military, for every regulation in the military, there's some sort of exemption or waiver. So there always has been. So these people are coming out and saying, oh, these are exemptions. It doesn't matter. One, it's law. And two, they've always been around. So, as much as getting vaccinated has always been around, so is the law to not be vaccinated. So to kind of get to the civilian side now, I've stated USC code. So USC is the United States Code. Okay, there are codes for everything, and I'm specifically want you to look at code 21, 10, and 5. And I'll get into, I write it out and I still don't read shit on
At
which
least you
one
write
they
it
were.
out. I just wing it.
So USC code 5, subject section 105. If I remember, USC code 10, it was section 101. Gotta love it. My memory comes back when I don't need it. So right now, civilians are being ordered to get inoculated or vaccinated under Executive Order 14042 and 14043. So 14042 are parties that contract with federal government under the supposed U.S. Code 40, which, again, let's throw some legal jumbo at people, but U.S. Code 40 deals with federal properties and administrative services. So we're talking about buildings that are bought and sold, and how the frick does that actually have to do with an executive policy, right? An executive order or regulation. So know what you're citing, what you're reading, and what they're doing, because the ability for them to say that because you contract with them under U.S. Code 40, I've yet to find how that actually applies to contractors. Right now, one of the biggest things they're doing is they're using scare tactics. I'm going to fire you. I'm going to dishonorably discharge you. I'm going to go after you, whatever it is. There's the old phrase, you'll have your day in court. What that means is if somebody is enacting something that's illegal or unlawful, it is your duty to fight it, but not fight it to where you implicate yourself as now doing something wrong. So if an officer is illegally detaining you, be detained and have your day in court, because now that officer is going to get in trouble and you're not. But if you fight the officer, you're in trouble. It's the same thing here. If you have military officers, which I just won and fought in this state, they were trying to force a vaccine. They told soldiers, here's your FDA approved vaccine. If you don't get it, you're going to get dishonorably discharged. So I had 5 soldiers that were holding out that I knew. And they unfortunately, a couple of them ended up giving in because they were afraid of being dishonorably discharged. One, that's false. They can't be dishonorably discharged. So I will be taking sworn statements and holding them liable for the fact that they were enforcing an unlawful order. And as we know, soldiers are trained to follow orders, lawful orders, and fight unlawful orders. And then 2, the fact that it wasn't actually FDA approved. And I bring that up because when you fight this and you go to your work and you tell them, hey, this executive order states this, but you can't actually do that. So they want contractors and any company that contracts the government to get vaccinated under certain U.S. codes, but the U.S. codes that protect you, just like Army regulation codes protect us, if it's not FDA approved, they cannot force you to get it. So Executive Order 14043 requires federal employers to actually force or to get vaccinated under the Safer Federal Workforce Task Force, which highlighted 13 Executive Order 13991, the protection of federal workforce and requirement of mask wearing. They cite Executive or USC Code 10 and USC Code 5. So USC Code, or under that executive order, section 2, it says that I jumped on that. Did I make that clear? I'm sorry. There's so much information. So I was able to fight and get soldiers not vaccinated, or at least not forced to be vaccinated, because it is not FDA approved. So in the executive orders, under the USC codes, they're forcing you to get mandated. They can do that. It's not anything new. However, we read specifically, especially in 14043 and 14042, Section 2, Mandatory Coronavirus Disease 2019 Vaccination for Federal Employees. Each agency shall implement, to the extent consistent with applicable law, blah, 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 with exemptions only as required by the law. See the Freedom of Religious Restoration Act. So they can force you to get mandated, but it does say consistent with applicable laws. USC 21, USC 10. So 21 specifically states that they can only force you to get vaccinated under the FDA approved vaccine. So that's the big fight there. Currently, you are not denying being vaccinated. You are stating that if I am to be vaccinated, I am only to be vaccinated by the FDA approved vaccine, which is Pfizer Comirnaty, which is not available here in the US as of today, in October, late October. And they don't see it being available here in the US, even though it's available in Europe and other countries, till late next year, if I remember reading. Unfortunately, that's purely speculation, but as of right now, if you're facing that, you can literally walk in your employer and say, hey, Executive Order 14043, I'm supposed to get mandated, or I'm mandated to get the vaccine. That's great. Section 2 states that it has to be consistent with applicable laws. USC Code 21 states that it has to be an FDA-approved vaccine, because if it's not FDA approved, it's considered experimental and cannot be forced upon persons. It's protected by federal law. USC Code 21, 360 Bravo Bravo Bravo, 3 Alpha 1 Echo, I believe. Again, I'll have the links for that. And that specifically states that. So, and then again, it also states that with exceptions only as required by law. So you have that freedom of religious exemption even as a civilian contracting with the government. As far as how that goes, I'll also get some more information out there too. Section 13 defines, I brought this up just because it's funny, and I talked about the executive order only forcing or dictating how the executive branch operates, and it even defines that in the executive order. Section 3, definition, term agency means executive agency, excluding the government, the government of accountability office. That's what I was looking for. Thanks.
Earlier.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. I was trying to read through. I should have highlighted it, as I knew it was important. But yeah, so it even says in their own executive order, like when it defines the agency, it's only the executive agencies, which is the executive branch of the government, not judicial, not legislative, not state or county or school boards or those that like to think they are. And again, that is defined in USC 5105. Section 4, I went and looked up under USC 5, was general provisions. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. The funny part about that is, with the availability of appropriations, the FDA-approved vaccine is not currently available. So even law says that it has to be consistent with law and based on appropriations or applicability or availability, whatever you want to call it. This isn't the first time this has happened. There's plenty of site, and I've forgotten all but one because I wrote it down. And it is Dover Rumsfeld. Back in 2009, the anthrax vaccine for soldiers, they fought and won because of Army regulation. But again, you also have that right covered under 10 USC, 21 USC, and 5. If the FDA approved vaccine is not available, they cannot vaccinate you. And they tried to do that to soldiers, and they had a bunch of soldiers that actually had massive adverse reactions, to include Bell's palsy and death. I've spoken with a couple soldiers that have actually experienced those. Obviously, the Bell's palsy, not the other one. And because they were given the non-FDA approved vaccine for anthrax, there were huge legal implications. They went and fought at a Supreme Court, and the judge ruled against the FDA, because the FDA said, no, it's the same thing. The judge says, no, it's not. One is authorized under the FDA, and the other is not, until you authorize that one. And the reason for that, again, goes back to the liability, financial and legal liability there for those producing it. So there was some more I wanted to get into. I kind of forgot, so I didn't finish writing them down. But the big part of this is, one, we got to stand together on a united front and not allow others to put out misinformation. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a person that's done research. I've read this extensively, gone over it extensively. And I know you can learn things, two people can read the same thing and learn something different, but it's pretty self-explanatory. The fact that we have to be vaccinated has been around for a long time. There's an FDA-approved vaccine. We have to receive that one. And if it's not now, eventually all employers will. The big ticket items are the fact that they cannot preclude you from religious or medical exemptions. Medical exemptions, I didn't get into that because I'm not a medical person. However, if you've had adverse effects, you can simply go to your doctor and have them write that you've had adverse reactions to these ingredients. As long as those ingredients are the same as the vaccine, you're now medically exempt. There's probably more to that, but that's just kind of as I understand it. But as far as the religious exemption, that's one a lot more people are probably going to go after, and again, you're protected. So just know that you're protected, and it's not just certain religions. It's not just the Muslim religion. It's not just was it the Jehovah's Witnesses, Baptists? I forget. That basically said they don't really believe in modern medicine. I could be wrong. Again, please, if I'm wrong, correct me. Put the correct information out, because that's what we need, is the correct information. So, but then again, the fact that they don't have Pfizer Comirnaty. When Pfizer Comirnaty is available, you have to be vaccinated. Till then, they can't do anything. So have your day in court. If your employer comes to you, if the military comes to you, come to us. We have some legal resources. We have some people that are funding lawsuits. There will be some lawsuits coming out. They've had 2 lawsuits in New York, and one, I'm sure many of you heard slight whispers about a gym and some restaurants that were reopened under Cuomo before he got put out of his misery. Again, that was a lawsuit, and they funded another lawsuit with the nurses. They tried to fire nurses because they forced them to get the vaccine, but again, they can't force you to get the vaccine if it's not FDA approved, and the FDA approved one is not available. They won that case. Now, the problem with that is they can still fire you, and that's where it becomes a legal issue. I know I'm going off on a tangent. So remember, you're not declining, you're simply requiring that by federal law, by Army or military regulation, you are provided the FDA approved one. Currently in the state of Utah, there is no Comirnaty, and in other states that I've looked as well. So they cannot do anything until that's available. Once that becomes available, then you'll have to get vaccinated or request a religious exemption. The great part about requesting an exemption is they can't fire you until they either deny your religious exemption and allow for your rebuttal, because as soon as you deny it, you have so long to appeal. And that is in every process. I think there's like 3 or 4 appeal processes. You can go as far as actually taking it to a judge to have it approved, if it goes that route. But again, there's everything I read that protects you from them stating that they don't believe in your religious beliefs. They can't really do that. So don't deny it. Say, if it's FDA approved, we're more happy to get it. Take your day in court, because everybody is hired at will, which means they can fire you for any reason unless it is of a prejudiced manner. So if they fire you and you prove that they fired you or other people based on the fact that you're not inoculated, you have a reasonable fight on your hands to come back and say, well, they didn't fire me because I didn't get vaccinated, but the only people they fired are the ones that didn't get vaccinated. Fact trumps he said, she said. So,
Right.
If they fire a bunch of people that are older, not anyone else, again, they fired people for getting older. That was an obvious precedent set there. So they can fire you for any reason at all, but except for prejudices. So don't screw up, don't fight them, don't argue them, have your day in court. If they do fire you, I apologize. It's going to cause some hardships. Get on unemployment as fast as you can and reach out to get legal assistance if you believe that you are fired due to prejudices of the inoculation or any other prejudices, religion, demographics, and sexual orientation. So, and that again has been around forever, right? People can't fire you based on any of those things. So now, if you get fired due to showing up late and other stuff, that's unfortunate. So as you're fighting this, most companies are going to push back. So they will look for reasons to fire you, because there's a financial liability to those companies now that you're not vaccinated. Because now, once we fight the company and say, hey, you can't fire me based on the fact that it's not FDA approved, the company's gonna have to go back to the government and say, hey, you can't hold us responsible. You can't not use our contract because you can't provide an FDA approved vaccine. So now it goes back to the government. So it's a trickling effect. Everything has an indirect and a secondary indirect and a third indirect effect. So when you do fight, it's going to make the companies fight, which means they're going to they're going to have to revert resources to legally fight against other entities, because there are those that wholeheartedly believe in this and will fight this tooth and nail. So it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a fight. I talked about that. When this video posts, like I said, all the information will be there. If you have any questions, you can email me at S is in Sierra, C is in Charlie, H is in Hotel, I is in India, G is in Golf, G is in Golf, I is in India, N is November, S is in Sierra, the number 2 at yahoo.com. And if I start getting spam on other stuff, I'm gonna have to shut it down. So please use that respectfully, because if not, I'll shut it down, and the people that really need help won't be able to get that help, get that information. We've got to stand together. We've got to help each other and not screw it up for everybody else. There's a lot of information. I apologize. Hopefully you're really good at editing, because I kind of
No, I suck at editing.
jumbled all over the place.
I just wing it.
Just wing it.
Yeah.
I tried not to wing it. I laid it out, but I'm a squirrel. You dive into this stuff and you read it, and it just takes you so many places. If you look at my computer screen, I have almost 20 tabs open on each monitor out of 4 monitors.
Like I said the other day when I talked to you on the phone, you just started spitting all this information. I'm like, we need to get this out, so here it is.
Yeah, so I appreciate you doing that. As I continue to research, more information will be put out, and we will continue to compile that information into a singular source so we can put that out for you guys. One, so like I said, we can stand united, and 2, so that you will also understand that information, have it at your tips, as well as be able to tap into those that may have to go to some sort of lawsuit. So you'll be able to present to these people to get that help. Because hopefully we will get a full lawfare going to where these lawsuits will be funded and paid for. Because I know a lot of us, we just want to work and be left alone. Mm-hmm. But if we don't stand up, there's not going to be a loan left. Thank you, Brian, for that. I stole that from him. It was on the way up, buddy of ours. We were jumbling, and he said it, and it kind of stuck. So,
Alrighty.
Any questions? Anything to clarify real quick?
No.
Just clarify, don't decline it.
Yeah.
As soon as you decline it, you've taken out that part of your fight. So do
Right.
not, I decline.
Right, yeah. You are not declining the vaccine in any way, shape, or form. You are simply requesting to be provided with the FDA-approved vaccine. Or if you're seeking a religious exemption, that you are given fair treatment in requesting that religious exemption, and that you are not going to your first-line supervisor who knows nothing about the law, let alone nothing about religion, to make that call, because it's not his job. And if he does, well, now him and his boss and the company are all liable. So again, if that happens, you get fired, then you come to us and we help get you in contact with a lawyer, and you go after the company, and then the company has to go back to the government and say, hey, look, we had all these guys request religious exemption. Sorry, it's your own law. You approved it. So
So to get your religious exemption, do you have to have a pastor or bishop or something write you a school note to take to your teacher, basically?
So the way
You know what I
understand,
mean?
the way I understand it is you do not. So the current process I'm helping some of the soldiers through is that you request the religious exemption, and that company, that unit, or that chain of command should have a documentation that is their procedure for requesting that. If they don't, well, then figure it out and come back. Till then, can't do shit. Because the rule protects you while you're requesting that. They can't force you to do something until that's approved. They have to stop and halt any action until they either approve or deny. So if you have something written based on your belief, that's only going to help your cause. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you don't want to give too much information, which is why it probably behoove you to talk to somebody that's an actual lawyer and deals with this. But the process we have is, or I'm helping some soldiers through currently, is that there is a form the military uses, because it's been around forever, to request medical exemption, and you simply state, in my religion, this is what we believe. You don't have to state the religion. You don't have to state a note from your pastor, a note from anybody. Some have brought something from a religious person stating, yes, this is exactly what we believe, and they've attached that as the request for medical exemption versus just writing it. But essentially what you want to do is just write why you are requesting a religious exemption. You don't have to state, I'm this religion. This religion means it's just based on this information. Which, again, if your religion doesn't believe in murder, and the RNA uses, KAGE, I'll have it written out, RE, 145, I think it is, which are aborted fetal cells, which means that, children were murdered in the process of making these stem cells. These stem cells were used in the vaccine.
Making of the vaccine.
So you can't partake in that. You're not going to, and if that means you die, and you're willing to accept that, or so the religious exemption states, right? or if you just believe in being a pure blood because your body is a temple. Notice I'm citing certain religious things. So putting things that would alter your DNA, you're no longer a temple and it's against your religion, right? So if you have issues, I would definitely reach out to your religious leaders and see if they can help articulate that. Or if you happen to find a religion that specifically states that for you, so be it.
Well, thank you.
Anytime, brother. Thanks for having me on. I've been using my back channels to trying to get the information out. So getting this out on a front, and I'm sure it's going to get taken down, but the more we can post it, the more we can do. There's a guy on TikTok, he's an old 82nd Airborne dude. He's the one that started me on this, the old tiki-taki. He put out some of the information that like, hey guys, there's these regulations, start reading it, and as he's read it, he's like, this is what I believe, but he's doing the same thing. Like, here's the information. This is what I read. Here's the information. Go read it for yourself. So that's what I did. Someone read it for myself and then went, holy shit, this is scary, because people are knowingly or unknowingly going against tons of federal regulations which hold massive legal implications.
Right.
So,
Well, alrighty, I'll let you guys get back so we're not too late. She's got a 2-hour drive, right?
just an hour.